Okay, so here we are. It is July 29th of 2022. As I said to a few folks as we were just starting the call, this is the last few moments of the legislative session in Massachusetts. So formal session, excuse me. So basically our legislature works in 2-year cycles. So we're at the end of the second year. And the deadline that everyone has agreed to is by July 30th, September, April, June, and November. Yep, all the rest of 31. So July 31st, the legislature, that's the deadline that the legislature has to pass all their bills, get them to the governor's desk. And then if the governor decides to veto or override or amend any of those bills, after the 31st, the legislature does not have the power to do anything about it. So it's like real crunch time. And what's interesting is that this is like, this whole week has been, you know, the House is doing things, the Senate's doing things, governor's passing things. All the things are moving really quickly because they want to get this all done. And then they're also in serious negotiations. So there are a bunch of bills, and we'll get to 2 later, that are kind of like in different points, but a lot of them are in conference committee where the House and Senate are negotiating some pretty significant differences between their 2 versions. And they've got to get it to Governor Baker's desk and hope that Governor Baker doesn't choose to use his 10 days to turn it around so that they can, you know, protect from any overrides. So it's a lot of chess right now. But let's start with some good news. The state budget. So get ready for the end of my chart, right? So we've been using this timeline to tell the story of the budget since January, and it's done. Right over here, you can see that the governor signed yesterday. The governor, with Lieutenant Governor Polito looking over his shoulder, signed the budget. He did return a few vetoes and some amendments to outside sections, but nothing having to do with the Mass Cultural Council allocation was amended or vetoed. So that means 22.5 million is going to the Mass Cultural Council, apologies for the abbreviation, but for their grants and their operations. In total, I think it's about 23.7 is the total amount, but that other amount that's not the 22.5 is actually going for earmarks. Okay, so that's pretty incredible, right? So let's just break this down for a minute. What does this mean? It's a 12% increase from last year, okay? And with current inflation rates at 9%, this means it's actually an increase. And I was reading an article this morning as well in State House News Service that was saying that the total budget is a 10% increase from last year's budget, which means we're actually ahead of the total increase of the budget. That's really good news. I also just want to put this little chart out into the world, which is since 2012, the annual allocation for the Mass Cultural Council has actually tripled, right? And I'm just counting the amounts that are available that are not earmarked amounts, right? So this is great news because that means more money going out to programs that you all are running, more money to support artists, more money to support festivals, more money to support local cultural councils and the work that they are all doing, more money to support arts education initiatives and creative youth development initiatives. So this is really great news. And you can expect an email from us on Monday celebrating that great news and encouraging you to thank both the state legislature and Governor Baker for doing this. Okay, so we're at the end of the formal session, and I'm going to talk about those 2 bills next, okay? So the first one is this economic development bond bill that we talked about 2 weeks ago. It is now in conference committee, which means that the House and the Senate both passed their versions. And I've pulled from both versions a couple of things which I think would be useful or interesting to the arts and cultural community. So first of all, there are specific earmarks for arts and cultural programming, projects, and organizations. There's also a 10 million amount, I say increase, but a 10 million allocation for the Cultural Facilities Fund. And it is explicitly for construction, repair, renovation, or improvement of artist housing and studios. The thing that's really interesting about this is that because this economic development bond bill is a combination of some of the ARPA money, some additional surplus money that the state has available, and some commitments about the use of bond sale money, it's kind of a mix, right? This 10 million that's going to the that would go to the Cultural Facilities Fund is not bond money that needs to be sold and then capitalized. It's actually, I believe it's surplus money, which means that if it's included in the final version, next year there will be $10 million in addition to whatever the governor includes in their capital plan, which usually is $10 million for the Cultural Facilities Fund. And that the $10 million that we're talking about here would be explicitly for artist housing and studios. That's a pretty big deal. That is brought to you by Senator William Brownsberger. And so I think the thing is, it's in the Senate version. It's not in the House version. Similarly, the pre-Broadway theater tax credit is in the House version. It is not in the Senate version. Okay. And those earmarks for specific projects and organizations, different projects and organizations in the House version than the Senate version. So that conference committee, which was appointed, I think a day ago, is working really hard to get this all done and get this out and get it onto Governor Baker, get it passed through the legislature and get it onto Governor Baker's desk. But there's actually some pretty interesting things in here for the creative community. Little update that the capital bond bill, which includes the reauthorization of the Cultural Facilities Fund, was passed out of the legislature and is now awaiting signature on Governor Baker's desk. So the hope is that signature will come any moment. Just to flag, these are the ones that I think, as I was going through them, that are sort of bills still left in the pipeline that seem like they still have some juice to them, would really have direct implication and impact on the arts and cultural community. There's still sports betting, there's still an energy bill, there are other pieces of legislation still being worked through, but these are the two that we're keeping our eye on. Okay, so I want to take a pause because we're at the end of a 2-year session and just think about all of our impact and what's happened. So we've been through a lot, and that's both in terms of personal things as well as professional things, as well as our sector at large. We are still in the midst of a pandemic. We are still working on reopening our venues. Some of us lost our venues and are thinking about how we might start them again. But I just also want to remind us of the fact that we've made an impact here, and there's been some pretty exciting things that we've been able to do. So just to review really quickly, right? So the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, which was part of the CARES Act, brought $16.25 billion across the nation to eligible venues, right? That includes independent live venues, nonprofit venues, performance, act managers, some cinemas. There, in terms of what that meant for Massachusetts, $407 million in those grants went to Massachusetts eligible groups. That's $407 million. Then the American Rescue Plan Act, which had many pieces, but also had specific carve-outs for the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities to the tune of $135 million each. Those groups then broke that money apart. They directed some of it directly to the regional agencies, like the New England Foundation for the Arts received some of it. So did all of the state arts agencies, including the Mass Cultural Council, that they then re-granted out. They also had their own direct grants that went out to organizations, and then they created another category of grants for local arts agencies, and several groups in Massachusetts actually were eligible and got some of those to re-grant out again. So that ripple effect is real. In the last 2 years on the state level, there's been $112,500,000 of public dollars that have been put towards the arts and cultural sector. And here's how I got to that number. We had a fiscal year 22 budget, which brought $20 million for grants and operations. The governor allocates $10 million for arts and cultural relief grants at the end of 2021. Then the ARPA spending plan also happened, the end of 2020. Then the ARPA spending plan happens, right? And that's at the end of 2021. It's the 2021-22 ARPA spending plan. $60 million goes for grants to individual artists, nonprofit cultural orgs, and for-profit arts businesses. And then the fiscal year 23 budget, there's $22.5 million for grants and operations to the arts and cultural sector. I am leaving out a lot of details, but I just want us to pause and recognize that we, through advocacy, through the champions in the legislature, over $100 million was put towards the arts and cultural sector in 2 years in Massachusetts, right, on the state level. So we did this, like all of us on this call, everyone who reads our emails, everyone who took the time to write their legislator, who shared their stories of impact and need, who attended the COVID Cultural Impact Commission meetings and shared stories. Every time you got asked to fill out a survey, which was annoying, and we all recognize we're imperfect on many fronts, but that data actually helped us build the case. We all pushed for more equitable language, which meant that that ARPA bill actually gives pretty strong guardrails around equity, inclusion, and lifting up and centering communities that were disproportionately affected during the pandemic. And we all worked together. So we did this, and we can do this again, right? So like, yay, this is good work, okay? And the legislative session is almost over. There's maybe a little bit more we might see in that number, that increased investment. But just because the legislative formal session is over doesn't mean A, that our legislators stop working. There's informal sessions through the end of December. And B, it doesn't mean that we stop working, though we're all going to take a breath. Like, we're going to pause our policy and action webinars for the month of August because we at Mass Creative are focusing our work on the Create the Vote Coalition. So I want to talk a little bit about that. So what's next, right? So first and foremost, we want to thank our elected officials. Asking for things and thanking people when you get them that's the closing the loop, right? We also are going to have the opportunity after the November elections to engage newly elected and incumbent legislators. So start thinking now about how you want to introduce yourself, your organization's work, the coalition that your organization is a part of, the community that your organization is a part of, you as an artist, the network that you're a part of, to newly elected lawmakers and incumbent lawmakers, because this period of time is a great time to get to know them before you even have to ask them for anything. The other thing that we're going to be working on, and we're going to need your help on, is we've got to set up for January of 2023. I can't believe I'm saying that right now, but I am. And the new legislative session, which is going to be the first thing that's going to happen, is there's going to be an opportunity to file bills. And we got to think about, what do we as a creative sector want to ask for next, right? What are the things that are at points of crisis in our sector that we want to make sure are addressed in this next session? And then you can see it's big, it's green, educating candidates and voters on the issues. That's sort of like the #1 task. And so that's why Mass Creative is part of the Create the Vote Coalition. And I have 2 really specific asks of you today. So the first one is over here. The Create the Vote Coalition has released its policy platform. It's got 4 bold policy priorities and details about how to get to those policy priorities. We need to get as many folks as we can to endorse this policy platform, because that's another signal to elected officials and candidates running for office that we are a united front, we're paying attention, and we're working together as a group to advocate. This policy platform came about thanks to the work of many people on the coalition, including the policy working group. It went through many revisions, and there were many opportunities to provide input. And I'm really proud of the work that that coalition did on this, and being part of that coalition. So please take a moment and endorse that platform. Then the other piece is, this is the other one, and it's coming fast. So next Wednesday, we are holding our candidate forum with lieutenant governor candidates running, Democratic candidates running. We have put out an invitation to all of the lieutenant governor candidates, and the 3 Democratic candidates took us up on the offer. So we're going to have a candidate forum and a celebration of the arts at the JMAC in Worcester on August 3rd from 7 to 9:30. So that's next Wednesday. And we want to make sure that we can really get as many folks as we can to turn out for that event. That's a really like strong, physical, visible signal to the candidates that, again, we're paying attention, we're united, and we're advocating together. It's also, frankly, I've missed all of you, and I'm kind of excited to see you all in person. And so is the Mass Creative team, G and Karen. So are many of the artists and Create the Vote fellows and coalition members who've worked on putting this event together. So we really hope you'll join us. You'll also see in the chat, we've included links to spread the word about both of these items. And this would be my other serious ask to you today, is that, we know that advocacy sometimes is a numbers game, and these two things are numbers games. So the more you can raise awareness of the forum next week and get folks to show up to that, and the more you can help us get folks to endorse that policy platform, the better positioned our coalition and all of us will be to make a strong case to whoever is elected governor and lieutenant governor of Massachusetts, that the arts community is paying attention, we work together, and we're advocating for the things that we need. So that's it. That's what I got today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I did it over 2 minutes. And I want to just check in and see if there are any questions. I'm looking through the chat now to just see. Gee, thanks for answering questions. Let's see. Oh, thank you, Joni, for doing that. I really appreciate you passing on the word. We will share that toolkit. So on Monday, we'll send out a little recap of this meeting. Nicholas, I can look that up for you. I don't know off the top of my head. So we will share in the email on Monday, we will share the invite to the forum, the toolkit to the forum. So if you want to share and spread the word, then we'll also share a link to endorse the platform. And then we will also share the toolkit to help spread the word about the platform. If we can get all of us working and rowing in the same direction like we do, we make pretty significant impact. And so that is what we're trying to continue to do. If there aren't any other questions, I will wish you all wonderful weekends. I will thank you sincerely for being on these calls and sharing your advocacy with your lawmakers and working towards getting over $100 million in 2 years for the arts and cultural sector in Massachusetts. Way to go, us. Have wonderful days. And thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.